welcome to this presentation on how design thinking could help you out of a business lockdown. My name is Robert van Espelo. I'm a Director of Business Innovation for Europe, Middle East and Africa, and I work for Oracle Corporation. The next 20-25 minutes, we're going to look at what happens to people and organizations in time of unprecedented crisis. How do we behave? And also look at how can we get better at preventing the negative impacts of that in a future situation. So there is no simple reset button, if you will, where we can say, okay, the world has changed, everything is different from what it was like a week ago, and now we are completely ready to handle that. Change is difficult. How do you embrace that change? Change is also good, many times anyway. And a lot of change for the better comes actually from a negative source, a crisis. The old adage in politics is never waste a good crisis, right? It's a common phrase. Typically, it sounds a little bit cynical, but it basically means that sometimes change is very hard to push through. There's a lot of resistance. Things seem impossible, and we are stuck in the status quo. But all of a sudden, a big crisis emerges, and things turn out to be very fluid, and change is very easy at that moment. Take, for example, a defense budget increase. Well, nobody worries about that if an actual war is looming, or take 2008 when the financial system was all of a sudden, threatening to be completely collapsing, and we had to take unprecedented measures in order to safeguard our financial system. We did things that upfront seemed completely impossible, and the same is true now for the COVID crisis. So never waste a good crisis. Make sure you use what we learn now to be better prepared for whatever comes our way next. It's kind of the idea here. And what comes next, we don't know. Nobody could have predicted a run on toilet paper. That was just a small indication of the long road we are traveling all together. But the danger is that we look at this crisis and say, okay, how do we get out of this? And we only look backwards and say, how did we used to do things? And that's dangerous, just to look with yesterday's logic. So how do people, and therefore organizations made of people, how do we react in times of uncertainty? Well, basically we can say there are kind of 5 stages for crisis management. We start in the business as usual state. We understand the world around us. We know what we're up against. We've set our targets. We know our goals. And we kind of know what's possible and what's impossible. And then the unimaginable happens, whatever that is. The crisis hits, and we go into a profound sense of shock. Everything we thought we knew changes. The rules are different, but we don't quite know what they are yet. And so we go as humans and as organizations into survival mode. This means, short-term focus, look only directly around you, what's impacting me right now, this moment. No long-term views, no strategic directions, just pure survival. And after a while, we come into a situation where we adapt to the new situation. We get familiar with the new rules of the game, and we know what the world looks like. And we start to take advantage of the situation. That's when we go into the thrive. This is when the new situation becomes the normal situation, and we are in control again, and we take advantage of the new circumstances, and that's always possible. So can you avoid this whole shock, survive, adapt phase and go directly to thrive? No, that's impossible. I don't think that's possible at all, because it's very nature. We don't know what the next kind of crisis will be. The best thing you can do as an organization, possibly as a person as well, is try to get through this shock and survive period and move quickly and try to go from the be prepared to go from the red line, as you can see it here, and go to the green line, where you go quickly through the adapt phase and quickly realize where new value is for you, where you can take advantage of the new situation. Maybe you can displace a competitor, take a position you didn't have before, find additional revenue streams that didn't exist before or were not open to you. And that's when you go into the thrive mode. What we see typically is that companies with a high level of digital maturity are quicker to get through this thrive situation than companies that don't have that digital maturity. So let's have a look. What changed for us basically overnight as COVID hit us? Well, here's 10 fields basically that we have identified, and possibly there are more, but probably more or less all organizations can recognize some or all of these topics, right? From the immediate need to social distance and to remote work, all the way through, the need for process automation. Perhaps your financial stability as an organization was immediately in question when it turned out that, closing down for a month or two actually could be a showstopper altogether. Especially the accelerated decision making, I think, became and is becoming more and more important. When so much is in flux, when so much is changing, how do you make sense of the new data points that you're getting in? How do you make real-time decisions about the world around you? And how do you take your organization on the right course? And also the digital immune system. Unfortunately, in direct correlation with COVID, we have seen the number of malicious and very sophisticated security attacks, malicious attacks on corporations increase dramatically. And so it was always essential to have good security measures for your IT organization. But overnight, it became critical to the survival. And some of these topics might not be relevant to you. If you are a bank, for example, then the supply chain is perhaps a little bit less relevant. If you are a government organization, the financial stability is maybe not the top priority, but some of these should be familiar. So how do you make sure that your organization is ready to handle this critical level of importance for these topics, right? So that's something we need to look at. And what you could do to make sense of it is prioritize it for yourself, perhaps through using a simple magic quadrant like we see here. We can say on the right-hand side, here you have those 10 topics, and let's place them on the magic quadrant, right? Is what has an extremely high business impact, financial impact on my organization, and what has a very high sense of urgency. If we don't fix this now, we are in existential trouble, right? So for some companies, that could be fixing the supply chain problem. It could be around process automation. It's a simple exercise. Just go through it with your team. Happy to help you with that if that makes sense. But put some of these topics on the top right-hand side and some of them in the other ones and say, okay, so this is what is both urgent and important to me. And if you know that, then basically you have your topic. So let's say, I don't know, let's pick an example. We could take process automation, right? You had a help desk, and all of a sudden, when the crisis started, it was overwhelmed, overloaded with 10x the amount of queries that people normally have. So you were not able to fulfill your customer experience the way you wanted to. People had to wait. They didn't get answers. They got the wrong answers, perhaps. Your company was unavailable for a certain time. Well, if that happened and you want to be ready for it the next time, that could be one of those topics. So what happens if you have a topic? That's where you can use what we call the rapid innovation approach. This is based a lot on design thinking principles. Our team likes to call it design doing, because we believe that it should usually people take 80% in thinking and 20% in doing. It should be the other way around. You learn through experience, you learn by doing, and in doing so you can get a better result. So get to doing quickly. But I mean, these are pretty generic design principles. And Oracle has a big team across all of EMEA running these engagements for years, way before the COVID crisis. But now that we have those 10 topics, it actually becomes a lot more practical to do this. This entire process is not rocket science, but it is aimed at getting results quickly. Getting your scope, which is the first, your focus. What am I solving? What's inside of the scope? What's out of the scope? Setting that correctly so that it is valuable, but it's also manageable. We don't want to, world peace, change the entire world kind of challenge and then fix it in 4 to 6 or 8 weeks, right? So pick a topic which is relevant to your business, which is important to be ready for the next crisis, but that is also manageable enough that we can make a real impact in 6 to 8 weeks. And we have that. Then as a team, we go into ideation and we come up with a bunch of crazy ideas how we could solve the challenge. We do this in a workshop style. Unfortunately, right now we have to do those workshops virtually, but that's entirely possible. We have good tools for that. And we set up user interactions that might solve the problem. But then we do a solution check, right? We keep all of those, maybe 30 ideas, and we measure them against, okay, is this doable? Is it risky? Could we build this quickly? Does it cost a lot? Will it be accepted by the organization and by our customers? And then we pick the one that is most likely to succeed. And then we move to stage 3, where we design quickly a user interaction and test it. Directly into a visual design that's not deeply technical yet. It's just, it looks real, it looks like the real thing, and it's enough so that we can experiment with it and see what the interaction is. And when we have enough feedback from real users and from the stakeholders, we know what the optimum user journey is, the user experience is. Then it's time to really build and test the solution. We do this using the same agile methods of delivery, using cloud environments that make it very easy to simply deploy whatever we need to bring our idea to life and to test that it works, that it is performant, that it is secure, that it can scale, and that it meets the challenge that we have set. And in the end, of course, we need to publish that, present it back to the stakeholders, along with the roadmap of how we actually put this into production. This is a very engaging experience, and it can take a while, but it's very fulfilling. And the outcome is surprisingly concrete. And often people that go through this with us, they say, I can't believe we got this much done in such a short amount of time. But that's precisely the idea. If you leave it too long, if you give yourself 3 months, it will take 3 months and the outcome will not be better. In fact, it will be probably worse than if you give yourself the 6 to 8 weeks in sprint mode that we do here. So what do you do when you develop your idea? You can go, technically speaking, right, through a couple of stages. We can go to proof of concept, where we test if this is feasible. Could it be done? Could our idea actually work? And then you can build a prototype, or the next step, pilot it, expose it to a limited set of users, get the real-time feedback, see how it behaves, make changes, always be making changes. And this is the thing about agility, right? You're making changes, but it doesn't mean you're changing course. You're still fixing the initial challenge. You're still fixing the problem. In our case, or what do we say? We are fixing the help desk problem. We're not changing that. The way we can fix it, that's our journey. That's what we learn while we are doing, while we're asking, while we're testing. And in the last phase before final production, we go to an MVP, minimum viable product. And this is a working full production environment where you expose the idea to a subset of your customers. And you can roll it out step by step, either geographically or by customer type. And this is where you know that you've made an impact. So if you do this rapid innovation track with us, what do you get? Well, we set up all of the Oracle Cloud services, of course. You get a visual prototype, or we call a mock-up. And depending on where we set our scope, you can go all the way to pilot or even an MVP. You get that initial implementation and a good roadmap, concrete steps of what we need to do next, or what you need to do next to take this into full production. So it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And so here's a couple of examples. I've already said, we have 10 key areas we chose in our example, process automation. But using this same method, these steps and this workflow, you can actually bring pretty much every idea to life in a very short time frame. And some of our examples, there's, as you can imagine, at Oracle, we do this at scale, right? So we have a huge collection, sort of a catalog of quick wins and improvements that we could use to address each of these 10 COVID-related topics. And that's actually a big benefit. So, for example, we've built a social distancing app, and this was, I believe, in Rome, or Pompeii, actually, for a museum, making sure that visitors remain, keep their social distancing from each other. But you could easily implement that in, let's say, a hospital in Groningen. Not literally. I mean, no, we don't mean to say these solutions you can just copy paste, technically, boom, it's done. And you can do it in 5 days, right? Every organization is unique, and the challenge is never exactly the same. But it's a big benefit when you can take like 5, 6 examples that make sense and show them to you as our customer in the early sessions and say, oh, this is what we did here, this is what we did here. And then the ideas start to flow. Well, that sounds great, but if we do it in my organization, we could actually, and so you can use it as a stepping stone to get off to a flying start. And for example, here's a solution we built for gamification in the workplace. And you might say, well, gamification has nothing to do with COVID, right? Well, yeah, but we've had many customers already come up to us and say, from an HR point of view, say, our employees are starting to lose that cohesion, that feeling of being one team, right? And working together on something. And can we do something to make sure we don't lose that? That's critical for a company, right? That you believe that you are one team and you feel connected with each other. So maybe you could use that same principle of gamification to make sure you keep connected to your colleagues, and that you learn fun facts about them, and that you have little challenges in between and you can earn points or whatever. So you can take such a concept and translate it immediately. And then the last one I have here is on the reduced help desk workload. Well, that's actually the one we're talking about now, right? What can you do? So you can go in many directions with that. You could say, well, we need a better knowledge base in the environment, or we need a good digital assistant. All of those are fine, and we can take 5, 6 other different approaches to solve that peak demand on the help desk. But you can take the process and basically fix any weakness that you have in your company. I'm not promising, we fix the entire company in 6 weeks, but this is a great way to make sure that when a next crisis comes along, through the process and by the steps that you take now, you are much better equipped to get through that survival stage, through the adaptation phase, and come to the thrive phase quicker. So you get a lot of value out of this. In fact, I'd like to invite you all. We have a third session, which is the actual hands-on workshop. And I'd like to invite you all to register for that, where we will experience all of these steps in lightning speed, right? Where we're just going to take an hour or so. And that's not enough to, go through everything real time. So we will need to take some shortcuts. but you will see and experience and work yourself and find out what it is like to get rapid innovation going for your organization. You will get the details on how to register for the workshop shortly, and I hope to see you there. Thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.